Imani adjusted the cuffs of her oversized black robe. The courtroom gavel clenched tightly in her hand like a promise she wasn't sure she was allowed to make. The hallway of Lockridge High echoed with laughter, music, and the rustle of candy wrappers. Halloween night at school was supposed to be fun, light-hearted, a chance to pretend. But Imani wasn't pretending. When she stepped through the gym doors, silence didn't greet her. Snickers did. A boy in a bloody surgeon's outfit muttered, "Look, it's Judge Judy's broke cousin." Another voice added, louder this time, "Girl, who you trying to be? Ain't no black judges in real life." Imani didn't flinch. Not at first. She kept walking, her back straight, eyes ahead. But every step felt heavier than the last. Not because the robe dragged, but because it wasn't just fabric. It was history. It was grief. She made it to the refreshment table, poured herself some flat orange soda, and stood alone. From across the room, Mrs. Tilden, the debate coach, gave her a disapproving glance. "You know, Imani," she said with that forced chuckle only adults use when they want to insult you nicely, "some costumes just don't land, sweetheart. Maybe next year pick something a bit more fun, or realistic." Realistic, like a maid, like a witch, like something people were used to seeing her as. Not a judge. She shouldn't have cared. She'd heard it all before. But this time, something cracked. Because this costume wasn't random. It wasn't about Halloween. It was about the woman who raised her. Her mother, Noelle Carter, a soft-spoken single mom who used to come home from cleaning offices with tired hands and unfinished stories. Imani never knew what her mother studied in college, only that there were old law books in the closet, still smelling of ambition and dust. Once when she was 13, Imani had asked, "Mom, why didn't you ever become a lawyer like you wanted?" Noelle had looked away, smiled like someone remembering the shape of a scar. "Because sometimes, baby, the system decides who gets to wear the robe, and who gets erased." That night, Imani didn't sleep. And from that year on, she vowed, "If my mother couldn't wear it, I will." So tonight, she wore it. Wore it knowing what it meant. Wore it because even if no one in the room saw her, she needed to see herself. But as she stood alone by the bleachers, watching pirates and vampires dance beneath fairy lights, doubt gnawed at her rib cage. What if they were right? What if this robe didn't fit her either? She clenched the gavel tighter. Just then, a scream, a crash of metal folding chairs. A girl in a princess costume collapsed near the stage, body convulsing. Everyone froze. Some screamed. Others pulled out phones. Imani ran, not because she knew what to do, but because no one else was doing anything. She dropped to her knees beside the girl, her robe puddling on the floor like spilled ink. Her voice, firm but trembling, rose above the chaos. "Check her bag, she has allergies. Someone find an EpiPen." No one moved, so she did it herself. Her hands fumbled but found the injector. She jabbed it into the girl's thigh, whispering, "Stay with me, stay with me." The music had stopped. The lights still blinked. But the room held its breath. The princess stopped shaking. And all at once, the only person still standing in that silent gym was the girl in the judge's robe. She didn't know someone had filmed the whole thing. She didn't know that by sunrise, 3 million people would know her name. She didn't know that in 4 days. Her mother would be called to testify before the Senate. But tonight, in a room that mocked her dream, Imani Carter delivered her first verdict. And the world was about to hear it. Some stories stay with you. The rest, you miss unless you're watching. By Monday morning, the video had already reached 3.2 million views. Black girl in judge costume saves classmate. Student becomes hero in a robe. She dressed for the role, then she earned it. Imani didn't go to school that day. She sat curled on the couch, robe folded beside her like something sacred. The gavel rested silently on the kitchen table, still stained with the sticky punch from the gym floor. Her phone buzzed nonstop, Reporters, emails, anonymous messages. Everyone wanted a quote, a soundbite, a piece of the girl who dared to dream big and proved them all wrong. But Imani didn't feel like a hero. She felt exposed, as if the world had ripped open the one thing she had kept safe, her ambition, her mother's legacy. She stared at the ceiling, remembered the faces, the laughter, the sting behind every smile. Lockridge High wasn't a school built to dream big. It was a place where ambition was treated like a dress that didn't fit. Too long, too bold, too black. Her AP government class had a framed photo of the Supreme Court, all white faces, except for the single tiny dot of Thurgood Marshall, placed conveniently in the back row. Every time Imani raised her hand to speak, she saw how Mr. Ellington's eyes narrowed. Not in curiosity, but control, as if wondering when she would finally learn her place. Once, when Imani scored highest on the constitutional law unit, he said, "Imani, maybe you'll make a fine secretary for a judge one day." That was last month. She remembered how quiet the classroom got afterward. No one defended her. Not even the one black boy in the back who kept his headphones half on, half off. Like hope was something he never fully committed to anymore. Her mother, Noelle Carter, noticed the change in her. Noelle always noticed things, like how Imani used to sleep with a flashlight to read late, or how her daughter carried herself taller when no one was watching. But lately, Imani had stopped asking about the law. She stopped opening the dusty case books stacked on the bottom shelf, stopped sketching courtroom layouts in her notebooks, stopped dreaming out loud. And Noelle said nothing. She just watched, like someone waiting for a storm they'd seen before. That morning, after the video went viral, Noelle called Imani 3 times. She never called more than once. By the 3rd call, Imani picked up. Her mother's voice was calm. Too calm. "Come home, don't go to school today." "I wasn't planning on it." "Good." A pause. "We'll talk after dinner. There's something I need to tell you." The line went dead. Imani stared at the phone, heart hammering. Not because of what the world thought of her, but because her mother never said things like that. Never admitted uncertainty. Never said, "There's something I need to tell you." That afternoon, Imani opened the old cedar box beneath her mother's bed, the box Noelle told her never to touch. Inside were worn law journals, certificates, newspaper clippings, and a nameplate. Noelle Carter, Assistant District Attorney. Not just a law student, not just someone who used to want to be a lawyer. She had been one, once. Why hadn't she ever said? And why had she walked away? At the very bottom of the box, folded like a secret, was a letter. From the Office of Judicial Oversight, marked, confidential, case dismissed, 2004. Imani didn't open it. Not yet. The headlines outside kept building. The world saw a hero, but in this quiet apartment, Imani saw a woman who had once tried to wear the robe and had it taken away. And for the first time in her life, Imani wasn't sure whether the robe she wore in the gym was a costume or an inheritance waiting to be reclaimed. The robe wasn't a costume. It might have been something left behind, for her to finish wearing. The letter sat on her desk for hours, unopened. Imani stared at it the way someone stares at the ocean before deciding to wade in, knowing that once you go under, you don't come back the same. The envelope was weathered, corners softened by time. The ink on the return address faded. But one word stood out like a siren. Dismissed. She hadn't told her mother she found it. She hadn't told anyone, because deep down, she wasn't sure she wanted to know the truth. What if her mother had done something wrong? What if the reason she never wore the robe was because she was unworthy of it? But that didn't make sense. Not with how Noelle lived. Not with the discipline, the humility, the silence worn like armor. So that night, when the apartment fell into its usual hush, Imani slipped into her room, turned on her desk lamp, and tore the letter open. It was worse than she imagined. Not a dismissal of guilt, a dismissal of justice. Noelle Carter, assistant district attorney, had filed an internal complaint in 2004 accusing a sitting judge of racial bias and unlawful sentencing patterns, specifically against young black male defendants. The response? Case dismissed. Insufficient merit. Noelle was quietly removed from her post 3 months later. No trial, no hearing, no headlines. Just silence. Her name vanished from every official listing. She was offered a consulting role in a private firm, one that required no courtroom appearances, and she never returned to law again. Imani read the letter twice, hands trembling. Suddenly, the law books in the closet felt heavier. The quiet dinners, the half-finished sentences, the way her mother always looked away during the news. Imani hadn't grown up with a quitter. She'd grown up with a woman the system erased. And now, the system wanted to make her a hero. The next morning, Imani opened her phone to chaos. The video had passed 5 million views. Her name was trending. But it wasn't just about the rescue anymore. It was about the mystery behind her. Who is Imani Carter? Where did she learn first aid? Is her mother in law enforcement? One TikTok user even zoomed in on the corner of the video. That's not just a costume. That robe has embroidered initials. That girl came prepared. By noon, 3 reporters were outside her apartment building. One left a business card at the door. By 3 p.m., her principal called. Imani, the school board has received media requests. We need to speak with your mother, preferably before things get political. Imani felt her pulse drop. This wasn't about Halloween anymore. It was about history, and whose version of it gets to be remembered. That evening, Noelle finally sat across from her at the kitchen table. No television, no distractions, just 2 mugs of tea between them, steam curling upward like ghosts that had waited years for this moment. You read it, her mother said softly. Imani nodded, didn't speak. I tried to fix something once. I was younger than you are now. Thought the truth would be enough. She paused. It wasn't. Imani whispered, Why didn't you ever tell me? Noelle looked her daughter in the eyes, and for the first time, there was no steel there. Only ache. Because I didn't want you to inherit my fight. I wanted you to build your own. But Imani had already inherited it. She'd carried it into a gym on Halloween night. She'd worn it without knowing. And now the world was watching. She looked down at the gavel on the table, then back at her mother. What if I want to finish what you started? Her mother didn't answer with words. Just one slow nod. Some legacies aren't passed down in wealth or title. They're passed in silence, in robes never worn, in letters never mailed. And in that moment, Imani Carter understood. She wasn't just a girl in a costume. She was a verdict waiting to be heard. By the end of the week, she was on every screen, not just in retweets and TikTok stitches, but in headlines, debate shows, morning news segments. Student saves classmate in judge costume, then public finds out she's the daughter of a buried scandal. Meet the teen reviving her mother's fight for justice. Is this the next face of America's broken court system? They spoke her name with reverence now, Imani Carter. The same name her teachers once forgot during roll call, but behind closed doors, Imani felt everything unraveling. Noelle had started locking her office drawers again. There were phone calls she took in the hallway, long ones with quiet words like nomination, premature public sentiment. When Imani asked what was happening, her mother only replied, They're paying attention now. That's not always a good thing. At school it was no better. Mrs. Tilden, the same teacher who once laughed at Imani's costume, now smiled with wide, performative praise. You're such an inspiration, sweetheart. You remind me of young Michelle Obama. Imani wanted to scream, because now that the world approved, everyone claimed they'd always believed in her. They said things like, I always knew she was going places, when the truth was, They never even knew how to pronounce her name. Her locker was decorated with hand-drawn gavels, glittery signs that read, Judge Carter. One even said, Future First Black Female Chief Justice, in pink cursive. Imani peeled that one off herself, because this wasn't a dream anymore. This was a spotlight, and the heat of it burned through everything fake. That Friday, a national news anchor arrived in town to interview Imani and her mother. The questions started soft. How did it feel to save someone's life? Where does your strength come from? But then came the turn. Ms. Carter, is it true that you were dismissed from the district attorney's office in 2004 after filing an internal complaint? Do you believe your daughter's moment is being used to revive your unfinished political ambitions? Noelle sat still, eyes steady, hands folded. I have no ambitions, she said. Only a memory, and a daughter brave enough to face the things I couldn't. Silence followed. But in that stillness, something shifted. That night, Imani locked herself in her room and sobbed. Not because she was weak, but because no one prepares you for being powerful in a system that once erased your bloodline. She looked at herself in the mirror. Not in the robe, just Imani. Skin still dark, eyes still tired, name still mispronounced. And yet, somewhere in all the noise, all the pressure, she remembered. What if I want to finish what you started? Noelle's nod, the fire in her silence. It wasn't about the robe anymore. It was about the verdict she would deliver. Not in court, not in costume, but in how she lived, how she fought, how she carried her mother's unfinished story without letting it break her. Some stories don't go viral to be remembered. They go viral because someone, somewhere, finally stopped whispering. And Imani Carter? She wasn't whispering anymore. Before Imani Carter ever picked up a gavel, her mother dropped one. The courtroom had felt colder than usual that morning. Not from the air vents, but from the way Judge Paul Whitman looked over his glasses without ever really seeing her. Assistant District Attorney Noelle Carter stood with a folder in her hands, her voice calm, clipped, clear. Your Honor, I respectfully recommend probation and community service. It was his first offense. No prior record. The boy sitting in the defendant's chair didn't look older than 17. He was shaking, caught with a friend's backpack. Inside, a vape pen and a bent lockpick. The story was messy. But the facts were clear. Noelle had read them twice. Talked to the boy's mother. Double-checked every line in the juvenile diversion policy. It was a case that should have ended with a second chance. But Whitman didn't read the file. He just said, 18 months, juvenile facility. Then banged the gavel, like a door slamming shut. Noelle's voice didn't shake, but something inside her did. With respect, Judge Whitman, this ruling contradicts. Ms. Carter, he interrupted, slow and patronizing, if you'd like to engage in activism, I suggest a different profession. Then the smile, thin, final. Noelle stood there a moment longer. She blinked once, then gathered her papers. But that night she didn't go home. She stayed in the office, lights off, hands shaking as she wrote the internal complaint. No co-signers, no backup. Just truth on paper, signed by a woman the system had always expected to stay quiet. 3 weeks later, her name vanished from the case rotation. Her office reassigned. Her title, Under Review. And just like that, the girl who once dreamed of wearing the robe was told she didn't belong in the room at all. Now, so many years later, Imani sat in silence, holding the faded complaint in her hands. So this was what her mother had carried. Not just law books, not just silence, but erasure. You tried to stop it, she whispered, and they erased you for it. Her mother didn't look away, didn't flinch. I fought, but I fought alone. You're not alone anymore. Everything after that moved with a kind of clarity Imani hadn't felt before. She opened her laptop, reopened her college essay, the one titled, Why I Want to Sit on the Other Side of the Bench. She deleted the last paragraph and wrote, My mother once believed the truth would be enough. She was wrong. But I was raised by that silence. And silence, passed from mother to daughter, turns into fire. I don't want justice that whispers. I want justice that listens, even when it doesn't like what it hears. This robe doesn't make me brave. It reminds me of who never got the chance to wear it. She hit send. Not with pride, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet certainty that no matter who tried to silence this story again, she had already spoken. The first time she spoke publicly, Imani's hands shook. Not from fear, from containment. The kind of trembling that happens when a dam is about to break, not because it's weak, but because it's full. The school board had organized a community recognition assembly the week after the video passed 10 million views. They called it a celebration. But it felt more like a performance. Imani sat in the front row, next to her mother, both in plain clothes. No robe, no costume, no mask to make anyone feel more comfortable. When the principal walked up to the mic, he smiled like someone posing for a camera that wasn't even there. "We are proud to recognize Imani Carter, a shining example of bravery, poise, and Lockridge spirit." Applause. Flashes from local reporters. Mrs. Tilden dabbing fake tears in the third row. Imani's name was pronounced right this time. They handed her a plaque, a bouquet, a certificate with the school's seal, and a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. The time is always right to do what is right. She held it for exactly 3 seconds before stepping forward. "I'd like to say something." The mic wasn't offered, so she walked over and took it. Her voice cut through the auditorium like clarity. "I didn't act because I wanted recognition. I acted because no one else did." She glanced at the staff table, at the principal, at the guidance counselor who once told her to consider hospitality studies instead of pre-law. For years I've been told to dream smaller, that I was too intense, too ambitious, too serious, that maybe law wasn't for girls like me. The room shifted, but I wore that robe not as a joke, but as a reminder of someone who wore it in silence before me, who never got this mic, this room, this applause. She looked at her mother. Noelle wasn't smiling. She was crying. Quietly. Fully. "I don't want your awards. I want better outcomes. I want teachers who believe in black girls before they go viral. I want principals who don't wait until the cameras come to say our name's right." She lowered the mic. "This plaque will look great in your hallway, but I hope my story lives in your curriculum." She handed the certificate back, walked off stage. No music played, but no one spoke for almost a full minute. And that silence? It was louder than any ovation. That night, at home, she received an email. Subject: Federal Youth Leadership Panel. Keynote request. A senator had seen the clip. Wanted her to open a panel on youth justice at the state capitol next month. Noelle stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. "Will you do it?" Imani didn't turn around. "You wanted me to build my own fight." "And you are," Noelle said. "But you're not building it alone anymore." Imani clicked reply. Typed, "Yes, I'd be honored." Then leaned back in her chair, gavel beside her desk, robe folded neatly in the corner. She didn't need to wear it right now, because now people were finally listening. Some voices get lost in the crowd. Some are taken before they ever speak. But some wait until the world is quiet enough to hear them. And Imani Carter? She had just cleared the room. The clip was only 47 seconds. A grainy old phone recording from 2 years ago. Imani, smaller, quieter, stood outside the guidance office, her backpack slung too low, her hands clenched into the sleeves of her hoodie. Mrs. Tilden's voice was clear through the thin drywall. "I just don't think she's a strong fit for law. Too emotional. She shuts down when challenged. Law requires restraint." The assistant counselor murmured something back, inaudible. Then Mrs. Tilden again, firmer this time. "Let's be honest. She's a first-gen black girl. Pre-law is full of legacy students. We're not doing her any favors by encouraging false hope." Click. End of clip. Someone had recorded it. Someone had kept it. And now someone had leaked it. By Monday morning, it was everywhere. Fomsproform. False hope trended across platforms. So did Munskorf Imani Carter deserved better. But Imani didn't post, didn't retweet, didn't speak. She had already said enough. Let them talk now. The school board issued a formal review notice. Mrs. Tilden was placed on immediate leave. The email was short. Pending investigation for bias, misconduct, and racial stereotyping. For the first time, Imani's inbox was flooded not with praise, but confessions. Other black girls, Latinx boys, first-gen students. She said that to me, too. They told me to aim lower. Thank you for making them hear us. At the grocery store that week, a woman tapped her on the shoulder. You made them look. You made them listen. Imani didn't smile. She just nodded. Because it wasn't about her anymore. 2 days later, the local news announced a community hearing. Mrs. Tilden, in a pale gray blazer, looking 10 years older than she had just weeks ago, stepped to the podium. Cameras rolled, microphones clustered. She cleared her throat. There are moments when silence speaks louder than any excuse I could offer. I misjudged a student. Not just her capabilities, but her courage. And now the whole world sees what I refused to. But Imani didn't attend the hearing. She didn't need to, because the apology wasn't for her. It was for every name that was never said out loud, every application never encouraged, every dream never believed in. It was for her mother. It was for her younger self. It was for the girl who sat in the hallway, waiting to be told she belonged. That night, as she washed dishes, her mother stood beside her, towel in hand. That woman's voice used to haunt me, Noelle said softly. Now? Imani asked. Noelle smiled, small but whole. Now she's background noise. When systems bend, they don't snap all at once. They shift, they groan. But sometimes they creak loud enough for the world to hear. And Imani Carter? She had made them creak. The hall was colder than it looked. A grand, echoing chamber of polished wood, velvet chairs, and cameras positioned with military precision. It wasn't a courtroom, but it felt like one. This was the Senate hearing for judicial appointments, and Noelle Carter's name had just been read aloud, nominated by the President of the United States, once erased, now summoned, and seated behind her, in the second row, was Imani. Not in a robe, not in costume, but in a navy blazer, no makeup, gavel pin on her chest. No statement, just presence. The daughter of the silence. Now the witness of its return. The committee chair cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, before we begin questioning, we acknowledge your prior service and the events that have recently come to light regarding your daughter's act of bravery. We thank you both. Camera flashes, whispered notes. But Noelle didn't flinch. I'm not here today because of what my daughter did. I'm here because I was qualified 20 years ago. Her voice never rose, but no one blinked while she spoke. The question is not whether I deserve this seat. The question is why it took so long for anyone to ask. That night, the clip would be played on every major outlet. The quote would be printed on protest signs, campus posters, and law school walls. But in that moment, the only thing that mattered was that she said it. After the hearing, as the room cleared, a clerk approached Imani quietly. They wanted to know if you'd like to speak, just a few words, for the record. Imani hesitated, not out of fear, out of reverence. She walked slowly to the podium, looked around. Not at the senators, not at the cameras, at the empty chairs. For the ones who never got here, my mother didn't raise me to speak for her. But I think she always hoped I'd speak for myself. A pause, a breath. When I wore that robe on Halloween, they laughed. When I saved someone's life, they clapped. But the robe didn't change. They did. This place we call justice. It isn't made of wood or marble. It's made of memory, of who gets remembered and who gets rewritten. And today, I want to say, in front of this country, you didn't make her powerful. You're just finally catching up. She stepped down. No applause, no music. just a stillness so pure it felt holy. That night, walking through D.C. under street lamps and October air, Imani asked, "Do you think they'll confirm you?" Noelle smiled without looking. "They already did, the moment you spoke." They walked in silence for a while. Then Imani turned. "Mom?" "Next year I think I'll dress up as something else." "Yeah? What?" Imani grinned. "Me, but louder." Some legacies aren't passed down in blood. They're passed in scars, in letters never read, in robes folded but never burned. And sometimes justice doesn't knock, it walks back in, with her daughter beside her.